The Jaguars have a three technique problem because they're all banged up. I'll tell you why that's a problem as we head into the first preseason game.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is your team every day here on Locked On Jaguars. We thank you for making us your first listen. I am Tony Wiggins, the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast that you can find wherever you get your podcast, whether you watch or listen. Make sure you tap into that location each and every day so you do not miss an episode. On today's episode, we're going to look at the three techniques in training camp that seems like it's a little problem that has kind of jumped up on the Jaguars. I'm going to tie it into the draft too, because there was something about the draft and free agency where the Jaguars did not address this position. First, I want to thank the everydayers for joining us. We appreciate you very, very much. Your time is very important, and you choose to spend 30 minutes with me here every single day, and we're happy. If you're new, I'm glad you're here because I'll give you a reason to come back, hopefully. All right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about Tyler Lacy. He's the man of the hour. We'll end the show talking about the importance of him and then other options the Jaguars may have to help them at three technique. In the middle, how does Mason Smith's absence matter? I saw him working out. We've been seeing him working out on the side the entire time. To the naked eye, he doesn't look unhealthy, but he isn't out there with the rest of the team yet. And what's up with Eric Armstead? That's where we're going to park this thing at the very beginning, and that's where we're going to start because that is the key. So much discussion about last year was about people playing out of position. No one more than Eric Armstead, who lined up a lot at big end. He spent some time inside, but he was getting rotated in and out. Just a complete show. It's a show is what I will call it. And that's where we'll leave that. But just so much to try to extract and pull when you're trying to figure out what happened. We forget that Eric Armstead was a big-time free agent who was that for a reason. He was a very, very good player. The thought was this year he would go back to his natural position. Of course, playing against coaches that a lot of them come from places where they played against him a lot and they know what his value is. But also the importance of having Mason Smith as a second-round pick, a big-time free agent, second-round pick as a three technique that gives you a lot of flexibility and it gives you a lot of comfort. Shout out to Trent Baalke again for doing something that provided a little bit of comfort for the new staff because that's something they didn't have to necessarily go out and address. But now I'm going to give Trent Baalke a demerit. That's a good thing. You can never have too many linemen. I don't know what the hell y'all was rotating them, but you can't have too many linemen. That's a good thing. The problem is the Jaguars, it seemed, the rest of a lot of the other areas weren't necessarily neglected, but were given bad decisions. Like the decision-making process of when and who they were going to add at those positions really, really stunk. So it made it seem like the luxury of having stacked players who play the same position, well, it wasn't a luxury at all. Turns out it was like, it's almost came across as like people were looking at him like, is that all you got to be worried about who the backup defensive lineman is? Well, what about your starters on your offensive line? So that's why, you give it, then you take it away. I'll say, good job, Trent, but I'll say, Trent, I did not forget why you did certain things. But to that effect, that's something that the Jaguars did not address in the offseason. They did not address it in free agency, and they did not address it when it came to that fourth pick that they had before they made the trade for Travis Hunter. In a draft that was deep with defensive linemen, they did not touch it at all. Nothing on the interior of the defensive line. So it left a lot of, hold on, man. We didn't use one pick or one player or one spot that could go either in free agency or the draft to that three technique. You cannot anticipate injuries. At some point in the offseason program, Mason Smith was one of the dudes that you heard the coaches talking about a lot. And then he hasn't practiced yet. We're speculating. I think it's a calf problem, but it looks like some lower leg injury, but he's off on the side. He's doing work. It's not like he's limping, but they look like they're bringing them along at a certain pace. Well, the day after practice, after another day of Eric Armstead not being there, the starter, Liam Cohen basically said he might not be there for the opener. You're talking something that's 4 weeks away, man. And there's been no Eric Armstead for 10 days or 10 practices out here with these teams when they've been in live reps. And he's an older player. Now it's starting to make me look at things a little bit differently. Even though you can't anticipate injuries, the question is, do they have to make a move? I was talking to Jordan DeLuca about this over 2 weeks ago. Tyler Lacy is the dude that is on deck. And that's why we're going to make sure we get to him here in segment number 3, because I think he's going to be the one that ends up running out there taking a lot of these snaps early on. So who else do they have on this team? When you look around at the players that they have who could potentially play 3 technique, I think it's going to be Devon Hamilton, and then they have to play Jordan Jefferson in nose. If Tyler Lacy, obviously he's not going to be able to go the entire game, I think what they do is they play Devon Hamilton and Jordan Jefferson together. But then you're tapping into your depth a little bit at nose guard, right? You want those 2 guys to be able to, exchange as opposed to running them out there. Well, you got Eli Mostert, the rookie out of North Dakota State. There's some more veterans on this team, but none of them seem to be. Kiwi Rose, he's another rookie. James Carpenter, another rookie. I actually like James Carpenter as a player when he came out. James Carpenter is another rookie. But they don't really have that 3 technique body type. And before somebody mentions Trayvon Walker to me, Trayvon's lost a lot of weight, man, and he's in real good shape. You want to see him outside as much as possible. So, yeah, right now, unless they have a plan to get Eric Armstead healthy. Wow, hell, I said Eli, but Eric Armstead healthy, they might have to do something. They absolutely might have to do something. Philly traded someone yesterday out to the Raiders for a cornerback. The Jaguars might start looking around the league and trying to figure out what they can do, because even if you get both of those guys back, you're just one injury away all over again from being back in the same position. So you gotta, it's not necessarily hedging your bets, but at this point, I'm starting to look at it side-eyed a little bit and thinking that maybe they're not as good a shape at 3 technique as I thought. And like I said, mainly it's because of injuries. But you see, when you have multiple injuries at these spots, you start to see that attrition and how these things could happen and how they could really affect the team, especially on first down. People say, yeah, they improved. They're going to get off the field. The key to getting off the field on third down is making sure you can win first down and you put the team in a bad situation and a bad spot. Mason Smith, what do we think about him? And I'll tell you what an insider told me when I said that they didn't take Mason Graham, and that's where we're going in segment 2. They didn't take Mason Graham. We weren't taking Mason Graham anyway. Why would we do it? We got our 3 techniques. We got both of them, and we don't think that kid's better than either one of them. Now, that is not from a decision maker. I will tell you that. But it is from somebody inside of the building who had their opinion. So I'll talk about Mason Smith, and then I'll talk about what some of the chatter might be if Mr. Graham up in Cleveland, Mason Graham, comes out of the gate and looks like he did in college at Michigan. We'll talk about that more here on Locked On Jaguars. This episode is presented by Yahoo Fantasy. It's the best time of the year. NFL kickoff is almost here, and that means NFL football season is back in full swing. And this year, Yahoo Fantasy is turning up with a fantasy football experience like never before. This year, me and my friends in the Showtime and Playmakers League, we're playing on Yahoo for the 16th year in a row, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your 1 millionth league. To celebrate 20 years of fantasy football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout August. To kick it off, they just dropped Yahoo Fantasy Guillotine Leagues, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo, where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's one team left standing. With the season around the corner, now's the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. If you're more into classics, you can still play head-to-head private leagues or join a public league. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. Moving and grooving here on Locked On NFL. I'm Tony Wiggins, the host of the Locked On Jaguars podcast. This is Locked On Jaguars, not Locked On NFL. What am I talking about? The three techniques. Injuries happen in the National Football League. We know that. But we also know that clickbait happens just like injuries happen. And there will always be people that will say, should have took Mason Graham. You should have taken Mason Graham. The thing about that is, if you do that, you got to take away Travis Hunter. And I know a lot of people don't want to think about that because you love Travis Hunter. But if you draft Mason Graham because your hindsight is adjusting your eyes at 2020, you'd be making a mistake. One, you can't let that cloud your vision, right? They had three guys they liked that had played a lot. Tyler Lacy did take snaps last year. Of course, Mason Smith showed a lot of potential. And then Eric Armstead. There's just some things you got to live with, decisions that you make. And that's what the Jaguars decided to do. The question was, can you move down? And if you don't take him, take somebody else. Well, guess what? Walter Nolan is banged up. He ain't practicing or hadn't practiced for a while. Last week, he was out and he wasn't practicing with Arizona. So what if you taken him and he gotten hurt? You can't think like that, right? But people will, and people will really think like this if the Jaguars struggle at that position because of injuries, and Mason Graham somehow, it's going to sound funny talking about the Cleveland Browns, somehow comes out and tears it up at the beginning of the season. And the fans will go, oh, man, I'm glad we got Travis, but Wig, you were wrong, man. We could have used that little bit of a three technique. Well, I don't think Mason Smith's injury is a long-term thing. In fact, I heard he worked his butt off in the offseason. And sometimes when you do that, you have a tendency to overwork something and maybe pull something a little bit, or things start spasming and locking up. And I'm not sitting there trying to tell you I'm a doctor, but you can actually, he didn't get hurt in any live practice because they weren't practicing. So maybe something happened in his workouts or while he was working out, and they have to kind of take their time with making sure that he's ready to go, and they're going to take their time with it. There are some injuries, hamstring injuries like that, man. If you rush that thing, you are just going to set yourself back. You're going to go all the way back to square one and maybe even worse, right? And those calf injuries or those lower leg injuries are really the same thing, especially when you think about in that position. He's pushing a lot, and he's getting pushed a lot. And you got guys trying to leverage him and twist him and go other ways. He needs to be able to perform confidently at a high level in order to make sure that he's firing on all cylinders. So I applaud the Jaguars for taking their time with him. I anticipate seeing him at some point before the preseason is over. And even if not, there's 2 weeks between the last preseason game and the first real game that they'll play against Carolina. So, yeah, I anticipate he'll be fine, right? But even if he isn't, we're going to have all preseason to see whether or not Tyler Lacy and or Devon Hamilton or whoever else they decide to run at that nose position or that three technique position will be able to help this team. As I went through it a little while ago, as I currently look at this roster, they don't have a whole bunch of dudes piled up on this roster. Maybe Kiwi Rose. They don't have a whole bunch of dudes that are built to maybe play that three technique position, especially guys that have a lot of NFL experience. They just don't have it. This is where you would see the value of a Jeremiah Ledbetter, who was on this roster forever, to where you can use him in a role of being a reserve and you'd be happy about it. And I know there's a lot of people that think, what about DeJuan Smoot-Wig? He's kind of stout. Yeah, he's 264 pounds. I'm not talking about that. You roll a 264-pound or 270-pound defensive tackle out there, unless his name is Aaron Donald, who I heard played at like 275. I heard he played less than that. But teams are going to line up and they're going to, let's just beat them up right there in that spot. Let's just make it smash mouth and keep the game tight and keep the game close. And if the Jaguars are good on offensively, it doesn't matter, because if teams want to do that, they have a way to do it. All you got to do is look at the way Jacksonville did Josh Allen in Buffalo a couple of years ago when Jacksonville was god awful and Buffalo was a really, really good team. The Jaguars ended up with the first round pick. That's the Urban's year. That was one of Urban. I think it might have been Urban's first win. If it wasn't his first one, it was one of the only two he saw. They beat the Bills, and the Bills were a way better team because they junked it up on defense to allow the game to be played a certain way. And then they found a soft spot where they were able to matriculate the ball and keep possessions of the ball. Therefore, they made the game ugly. And see, teams can do that to you. If they know that they can run, they will be patient, and try to run the ball right down your throat and hit you where you look like you're soft. It's like if you watch a boxing match and you see a dude come in and he's flabby, you already know they're going to hit him in the stomach all day because they feel like he might take it early, but eventually he's going to break down and those hands are going to drop, and then I'm going to start punching him in the face. And that's what will happen with the run. You get so in tune to saying, we need to help our three technique out. We need to help our guys inside out. Well, what happens is you start leaving other stuff open. And teams are able to get first downs they normally wouldn't have to get if you weren't trying to play big brother and look out for that interior guy. That's why it's pivotal. I think for the Jaguars to be able to go out and play, yeah, they can go out and line it up with people like this and use a three-man rotation at defensive tackle, play Devon Hamilton a little bit at three technique, which we've seen him do in the past, because he's like Marcel Darius, where he can do both. I still don't think that that's ideal. When you talk about winning games against good teams, every little thing matters. When you talk about winning games against good teams without having an identifiable, surefire weakness, and not saying that Tyler Lacy can't hold his own, but what I'm saying is what happens when Tyler Lacy gets tired. You have to have the depth that you need. And right now, Tyler Lacy is their depth. He is their third guy at three technique. And right now, he's going to have to start the year unless they go double big, like I said, or go out and make an acquisition for someone else. So what you see from Mason Smith over the next couple of weeks will affect this, whether or not they get a true timetable on Eric Armstead. It doesn't matter what you're going to see from Mason Smith. You're going to need Smith back regardless of whether or not whether or not Eric Armstead is going to miss those opening weeks. Can't have no regrets about no draft picks though, man. But what we can do is look at Tyler Lacy and say, okay, what are you built for? One of the strongest players on the team. He'll have to be very, very stout as we go through the preseason without those two guys being available. We'll talk about that more here on Locked On Jaguars. Today's show is sponsored and brought to you by Monarch Money. That is right, man. Monarch Money is there for you. If you are like me and managing your money needs to feel easier, then it's Monarch Money. That's all there is to it. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. You need it if you're like me and you're not tech savvy and you got all of these different apps. I want to string everything through one app like Monarch Money and make it easier for me. I was paying for one subscription 3 times, and that's not acceptable. Take control of your finances like I did with Monarch Money and use the code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. It's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. I'm telling you, you're going to notice when you start tracking your spending that Monarch Money is the real deal. Listen, I'm not trying to alarm anyone, right? I'm not trying to scare anyone about the defensive line. But the reality is the reality of the situation, and that is the Jaguars are pushing into the depth already at 3 technique in the middle of that defensive line. That's not necessarily an ideal situation. Eric Armstead probably or maybe won't be back for week 1, which is a month away. So whatever he's dealing with that keeps him from being at practice, they have doubts or not, or there's some there's some serious discussions going on about whether or not he's going to be available. So that scares you, because even if he makes it, but he doesn't get all greased up in the preseason like everyone else. Now, yeah, he's a veteran and all of that, but really, how confident are you in that? And then when you look at the second player, I consider him the three technique. I consider it 1A and 1B, because Mason Smith, I believe, is the future of this franchise at that three technique position. He's unhealthy. He hasn't been out there after having a great offseason. Mason Smith's out there, working on his side on a bicycle and one-on-one with one singular particular coach at the Miller Electric Center. And he hasn't been out there with his teammates. He's another guy that was looking to take another step and to move beyond just being a rookie. He finished the season really, really strong and really started to look the part of a dude that, man, ever since he came out of high school as a 5-star recruit, most people thought that he was destined for NFL stardom, and he may still be. It's not time for panic, but it is time that I believe, I saw James Gladstone today, I think things are working. I think, it's fluid. Of course, you got to go out and get a guy at this point. You got to ask yourself, how good is he? I don't think that there's someone out there walking the streets, not with 32 teams having 90 guys in camp at this point. I don't think there's somebody out there walking the streets that's going to sit there and help you, unless he's a veteran who contemplated retiring or has retired. One of those Linville Joseph type, even though Linville Joseph is a nose tackle, but one of those types of players from the past, right? A guy that kind of hung it up a little bit, but he's still there. He hasn't announced his official retirement. And Ndamukong Suh did that for a couple of years. That's a name for you. I don't know if he's a possibility, but that's another type that for a couple of years kind of hung out there and waited for the right kind of situation. I don't know. Or is there a team out there? Maybe we need to start scouring through the lineups for these other teams and seeing who has a guy like that's available or that they're willing to trade, who understands how the Jaguars want to play. But not trying to scare you, but it is something to be concerned about at this point and at this juncture of camp. The Jaguars will probably start their third string three technique at defensive tackle. And then when you look at the roster, the only thing that's standing there behind him is a whole bunch of other young kids. Now, what you would hope is that those rookies that I mentioned, what you would hope is those guys have shown them enough to the point where they feel they can steal some snaps with them. And the only people who would know that is them. So if the Jaguars don't go out and make another move, it would be because they're confident that these young kids, James Carpenter is one of them, and the other one is Kevy Rose, along with, let me look at the kid from North Dakota State, Eli Mostert. If they have seen enough on tape to say, hey, man, that kid ain't that bad, man. He can help us out a little bit. He can get us through just a tad bit. Well, your problem starts then. Well, what happens if there's a little, if Tyler Lacy gets nicked? If Tyler Lacy gets nicked, you might have to go to a bit of an odd front. That's where you play either Jordan Jefferson or Devon Hamilton at nose, and then go five technique, and that's where you would look at Smoot and all of these other guys, and then you stand guys up. Even if you use Trayvon at one of those positions, then that's where Nasir Abdullah comes in, Josh Allen back on the other side, or maybe you go Smoot or Emmanuel Ogba. There's some flexibility with it because the Jaguars run a 4-3, but sometimes they have an odd front where they go into like a little bit of a lightning package. Well, I don't know if that's necessarily what they called it, but they have 5 guys on the line of scrimmage. So these are all things to watch and monitor and see if they get tested by Zach Frazier in the Pittsburgh Steelers offensive line, the interior of the line. We don't know how much the starters are going to play. Liam Cohen talked today. He mentioned that he did. He said he texted Mike Tomlin, I guess so they could get on the same page in terms of the protocol when it comes to how long your starters are going to play. Teams kind of do this in the preseason. Look, what are our rules? What are we going? We're trying to work on things to get to the regular season here. that probably has something to do with blitz packages and all of the things, and how long the starters are going to play, so you can get a true read on unit versus unit and string versus string. There's a lot to think about here. I didn't plan on doing this show today, but when I heard the comments about Eric Armstead, and like I said, I was with Jordan DeLuca. We were talking about it a couple of weeks ago when we saw Mason Smith working out on the side. And I said, no, they'll be fine. They got Tyler Lacy. And Lugo, yeah, I forgot about him. But that was when we thought Eric Armstead was healthy, and he hasn't been. Through the contact portion of training camp, he's been non-existent, man. So it's something that we all really have to pay attention to and monitor. Saw John Gruden at practice today. That was cool. Saw Tom Coughlin, shook coach's hand, and enjoyed that a little bit. Lots of national people have been popping in, and I was talking to him. I saw Jared Bell today, and I asked him why. They say, man, it's Travis Hunter. Everyone wants to know about 12. The one thing I will tell you is about 12 is there are going to be some big plays, but there are going to be some he doesn't make, and there are going to be some little plays also where all he gets is 4, 5, 6, 7 yards. And one of the things that we can't do is we can't think that this is what happened with Reggie Bush. Reggie Bush and Ricky Williams both had great careers, but you know what? They came in with the expectation that their pro career was going to go exactly like their college career. And when it didn't, folks kind of started looking at it, funny. I think we have to be careful with Travis. I think he has the ability to make himself the offensive and defensive player of the year in the draft. In this year's season. But we have to understand, I'll take a few less plays being made. I'll take a few stats from being loaded up as long as the team wins. But if the team doesn't win, I think you'll start seeing them streamline some things and just going with their best, man, throwing their best combination out there. This is going to touch the ball. Travis, Brian Thomas Jr., ETN, and Dami Brown. We're going to milk those 4 players until we can get it right. But I don't mind them spreading the ball around, and I don't mind numbers not living up to people's hype as long as they win. You want to win? I'm going to explain to you how you win. Make Locked On Bets your second listen. Locked On Bets is the truth, and betting experts Lee Sterling and Kevin Rogers have daily Major League Baseball locks and can't miss football futures. Find Locked On Bets on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. I made my return back to training camp today. Glad I was able to get out there and come back and bring you this show. We appreciate you guys spending time with us here today. We value the fact that you choose to come here to Locked On Podcast Network. We don't take that for granted, and hopefully we deliver to you each and every time. It is your team every day here. We thank you for making us your first listen, and we'll see you next time.